Hey there, welcome back to Brad's Labs. We're going to continue with our thought experiment today. Today's was submitted by Megan, and she asked to take and be sent back to the Regency period. So let's go ahead and get into it. As I mentioned before, Megan wanted to go back to the Regency period. She wanted to stay a female, and she wanted to take and be part of the merchant class or the working class, somewhere in there. The Regency period was a time of amazing new changes and new smells being brought in with those changes. All right, so she gets into the time machine and she's rocketed back to 1811 in England. And the first thing that's going to strike her is the smell. The smell of human excrement, the smell of coal, the smell of animals. All those things are just going to slam her in the face. But what would have life been for her like at that time? Well, she's a woman, so she was either the property of her husband or of her father. And that's pretty much it. So thank you guys for joining, and I really do hope you enjoyed this video. I'm just kidding with you. You could see that this video would be rather short, and that was one of the problems that I came across when I was doing all of this, was how do I make these videos to be about that 10-minute mark that I try to aim for when I do make my videos, trying to get monetization someday, hopefully, fingers crossed. So I think I may have came up with a solution on how to get these videos to that point. The problem with just taking somebody from our time, dropping them into the time period that, like Megan asked, for the Regency, they're not going to get that full experience. And for me, my problem was I thought that the Regency period was a lot longer period of time, somewhere around 100 years. I deal in tens and thousands of years, and I found it kind of difficult to fathom such a short amount of time. The Regency period only lasted from 1811 to 1820, not long at all. I decided that what I was going to do was, instead of just taking somebody, dropping them into his time period, we're going to actually kind of build a story. So we're going to take them, their current age, and say, this is the year they were born. These are the events that led up to when they would have gone back in time. So the events that lead up to somebody being dropped back in time is very important, because without those events and without the knowledge of those events, you're not going to quite understand exactly what is going on. So take, for instance, 9/11 was a very world-shaping event for everyone, really. It shaped the way that I seen the world and how the world sees me. If I was just to take Megan back and drop her in time, yeah, she would get the sights, she would get the smells, but she wouldn't actually understand what she is seeing, she is smelling, why she is smelling it. I know smells are a big thing because I really, smells are important. We need to take and actually build that story up. So before we can take and send Megan back to the Regency period, there's a few things that we have to know about the Regency period. And let's go ahead and define what it was. As I said before, it was from 1811 to 1820, so only 9 years. And it was a time when George, the Prince of Wales, was ruling in his father's place, King George. King George at that point in time was kind of going through a phase in his life where he either wasn't all mentally there, or he was, losing wars left, right, and center. So that kind of probably hurt him a little bit mentally. So you have this guy that's ruling in his father's place, and that's where you get the Regency from. Megan gets into the time machine and she's rocketed back to 1811. But let's go ahead and look at from the time she was born, which was 33 years, but I'm not sorry, I told you her age. She's getting older, we all are. But 33 years before, it's 1778. What's going on? 1778, the American Revolution is in full swing. That same year she's born, they go to war with the French. Year after that, Britain goes to war with Spain. And then 2 years after that, Britain goes to war with the Dutch. Every single one of those was a loss for England. Fast forward a little bit, the French Revolutionary War is kicking off. Britain gets involved into that to try to save their monarchy bros, and they lose that one too. So now you have a monarchy and a government that are terrified of losing their power and terrified of losing their heads, quite literally. So they start to enact new laws. These laws aren't exactly kind. They are a way to shore up as much power as they possibly can for themselves. But alongside all of this turmoil, there's new technologies that are coming out. The steam engine, it's not new, but it has been reinvented to be new, quote unquote. And it's revolutionizing the way things are done. All of a sudden, you have people that are having to move from the countryside into the cities because there's no work for them out in the countryside. All the work's been moved to factories inside the cities. The year is now 1811. Megan's 33 years old. She's married. Her husband owns a bakery. They have 4 children, and it might have been a little bit more if it wasn't for the infant mortality rate. What else can she expect? Well, for starters, maybe only 10 years left to live, and that is being generous. What if the bakery's not doing so well? Well, there's a good chance that she might have to send one of her kids or all of her kids to go work in the factories that are popping up to help take and support the family. What can they expect from this? Well, the loss of a child, or at the very least, the child comes home missing an arm, a leg. Remember how I said if the bakery isn't doing so well? Well, that's a big if, for one. But in April of 1815, there was actually a volcano that erupted, and it caused a massive cooling of the climate. So all of a sudden, England is getting more rainfall than it normally would get. And this led to the crop failures, mainly wheat. The bakery uses wheat to make its bread. So all of a sudden, you've got this business that just might not survive. Okay, so they actually managed to get enough wheat so they're able to keep their business going. They have 2 options ahead of them here. One, they could take the high road and they can just sell fewer loaves of bread, but still high quality bread. Or they could take the low road and they can decide to take and add stuff to the flour to make it last a little bit longer. And they decide to go with that route. So they're going to add chalk or bone ash or a plaster of Paris, all sorts of different things into this bread just to make it last just a little bit longer. And this would have done 2 things for them. One, it would have allowed them to sell more. And two, at that point in time, white bread was what was sought after. The wheat bread that we look for today, it wasn't really all that wanted. What if her husband was abusive, an alcoholic, something along those lines? What could she do about that? Absolutely nothing. She had no choice in this whatsoever. She was considered the property of her husband. What about her children? Could she take her children with her and run away? She could, but then she'd be called a charlatan, all these other things. But her husband ultimately had say in what the children did. She had no choice in if the children went off to the factories and worked. She had no choice if her husband decided to sell her child to the local dentist so the dentist could pull teeth out of the child's mouth and give them to the wealthier clients whenever the dentist wanted to. What if she wanted to take and change any of this? Could she go to her government? No. No. She's a female and she doesn't own any land. So she had no say in anything that happened in her life whatsoever. But with all this, she still has her sense of smell, and she probably wishes she didn't even have that. With all the new people moving in and all the factories, there was the smell of burning coal. There was the smell of people. Not burning people, though that's probably something that she did smell at one point in her life. But it's the people being crammed into the city. They're coming in by the thousands, all for these new jobs. Houses are already hard to come by. Now they're even harder to come by. Food's hard to come by. Now it's even harder to come by. So you got all these people competing. But what is the one thing that everybody, when they move, brings with them? I know what you're thinking, clothes. You're wrong. It's bowels. You bring your bowels with you. And that would have been one of the main smells, was human sewage just on the streets. The smell of human sewage mixing with animal feces, mixing with trash, mixing with so on and so on and so on. All of these things would have just made this aroma that it would have taken a lot of getting used to. All in all, she would have had a pretty bleak life. The idea of all the romances that we get from the likes of Jane Austen, modern television, those weren't the reality for the vast majority of people. Life was hard and it was not forgiving. And if you type in Regency period into Google, you're going to get a lot of that romance ideas, the elegance of it all. Some modern day smut books based in the Regency period. And we do this because we don't want to think of what life was actually like for the everyday person. We only want to think of the elegance. We only want to think of the glamour. And it takes a special kind of person with no moral compass in any way, shape, or form to find any entertainment in this any way at all. Thanks for joining us today for this rather bleak topic. History is not always fun. It's often depressing. And unfortunately, that's going to be next week's too, because we've had an Irishman asked to be sent back to Ireland in the 1700s. So if you do like the video, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It does help us immensely. If you really like the videos, please consider becoming a patron. And then for that, I do hope you guys have a better day than anybody did in the Regency period.